Before we begin, please write in the comments section where you are watching this from. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel. The rich aroma of a beef stew, now cooling, filled the cramped dining area. Amelia glanced at the old wall clock, its ticking loud in the quiet room. The hour hand had already passed 9 p.m. She had reheated the meal 3 times, hoping her husband, Brian, would come home soon so they could have dinner together. Outside, a heavy rain began to fall, drumming a restless rhythm on the tin roof of their small rental house. Amelia pulled her worn cardigan tighter. An unease had settled in her heart since the afternoon, a wife's intuition that rarely missed its mark. The sound of a pickup truck stopping at the front gate made her jump up. Wiping her hands on her apron, she hurried to open the door. Brian's face was ashen as he stepped inside. His hair was soaked, his work shirt wrinkled, and his shoulders slumped as if carrying the weight of the world. There was no smile, no kiss on the forehead. As usual, he just walked past her, tossed his work bag onto the shabby couch in the living room, and collapsed onto it with a heavy sigh. "Brian?" Amelia closed the door and approached him slowly. "What's wrong? Is there a problem at work?" Brian didn't answer. He covered his face with his hands, his breathing heavy, like someone holding back tears. "Brian, talk to me. Don't scare me like this," Amelia urged gently, sitting beside her husband of 5 years and stroking his back. Suddenly, Brian looked up, his eyes red and glassy. He gripped Amelia's shoulders tightly, so tightly she winced. "We're ruined, Amelia. It's over," Brian whispered hoarsely. "The company is doing massive layoffs. My name is at the top of the list. And if that happens, the loan sharks after my mom will finish us off next week." Amelia's heart sank. The debt left by her late father-in-law had been a never-ending trap. For years, nearly 70% of Brian's salary went to paying off the interest alone, while Amelia had to stretch every last dollar for groceries. We can find another way, Brian. I can sell more baked goods. Or I could try applying for a job at the packing plant again," Amelia said, trying to stay strong even as her knees trembled. "It won't be enough," Brian snapped in frustration before his voice softened again with desperation. "Mom's debt is over $100,000, Amelia. If I get fired, they'll foreclose on her house back home. Where will she live? She has a heart condition." Brian's head drooped, a tear splashing onto the cold linoleum floor. Amelia cried with him, seeing her husband's vulnerability. She knew how much Brian adored his mother. "Then what do we do?" she asked softly. Brian slowly lifted his face. His expression had changed. There was a strange glint in his eyes that Amelia couldn't decipher, a mixture of fear, recklessness, and something cunning. "There is one way," Brian said quietly. "The big boss, Mr. Sterling." "Mr. Sterling, the owner of the company who had that accident last month?" Brian nodded quickly. "Yes, he's completely paralyzed. His legs are useless. Half his body is numb. The doctors said his chances of recovery are slim, but the board of directors wants to oust him because of his condition. The only way for him to secure his inheritance and his position is to get married, fast. A condition in his father's will requires him to have a wife by his side," he continued. Amelia frowned, confused. "So what does that have to do with us?" Brian swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing nervously. He took Amelia's hand, his cold fingers clasping hers. "His trusted assistant, Ryan, approached me this afternoon. They need a woman who is simple, unassuming, not a gold digger, and can be trusted to keep her mouth shut. They don't want a model or a celebrity who's only after the money and would leak Mr. Sterling's private affairs to the media." Brian paused, looking deep into Amelia's eyes. "They asked for you, Amelia." Amelia's world seemed to stop spinning. She yanked her hand back as if Brian's touch had burned her. "What are you talking about? Are you asking me to marry your boss?" Her voice trembled violently. "Do you realize what you're saying, Brian? I'm your wife." "Just listen to me," Brian interjected, grabbing for her hand again. "It's just a formality, just on paper. Mr. Sterling is paralyzed, Amelia. He's disabled. He won't be able to touch you like a husband. You just need to be by his side, push his wheelchair at formal events, and live in his mansion. That's it. That's it, you say? Amelia stood up, her chest heaving with explosive anger. You want to sell your own wife for your job? Where is your pride as a man? Brian stood up too, and then did something completely unexpected. He knelt at Amelia's feet, hugging her legs and sobbing uncontrollably. I have no choice, Amelia. I swear to God, I have to do this. If I refuse, not only will I be fired, but they'll make sure I can't get a job anywhere else. And Mom, those loan sharks threaten to burn our house down if we don't make a payment by tomorrow. Brian's cries were heartbreaking. Help me, honey. Help my mom. It's only temporary, maybe a year or two until Mr. Sterling's position is secure. After that, you can ask for a divorce, and we can get remarried. We'll get millions in compensation. We can live happily, have our own house, have kids. Amelia stood frozen, tears streaming down her cheeks. The image of her old, frail mother-in-law flashed in her mind. But the thought of being with a strange man, sleeping under the same roof even if he was paralyzed, made her stomach turn. I can't, Brian. This is insane. It's wrong. Amelia refused weakly. Brian looked up. His tear-streaked face hardened, the mask of desperation cracking slightly to reveal a manipulative side she'd never seen. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. The screen lit up, showing a text message thread. You don't have a choice, Amelia. Brian's voice turned cold, a stark contrast to his earlier sobs. He thrust the phone in front of her face. I already sent your photo ID and personal info to Ryan an hour ago. They've already agreed, and as a down payment, they've paid off half of Mom's debt. Amelia stared in disbelief at the messages. A photo of her, her personal data, all sent without her consent. You! Amelia was speechless. If you refuse tonight, Brian stood slowly, his gaze pinning his wife down, then the money has to be returned immediately. And since we don't have it, the police will arrest me for corporate fraud. Do you want to see your husband rot in prison and your mother-in-law die of a heart attack? Thunder cracked outside, coinciding with a loud knock on the front door. That must be Ryan's guy, Brian whispered in Amelia's ear, his voice like a snake's hiss. Wipe your tears, sign the contract. Save us. The knocking didn't stop. It grew more rhythmic and demanding. Amelia took a step back, her back hitting the cold living room wall. Her breath caught in her throat. She stared at the flimsy wooden door as if it were the gate to hell. Brian roughly wiped the last of his tears and turned to Amelia. The pleading face was gone, replaced by a tense, calculating expression. Without a word, he strode to the door and opened it. It wasn't a menacing loan shark standing there, but a young man in a crisp black suit, soaked from the rain, but standing tall with an intimidating aura. Behind him, a black luxury sedan was parked with its engine running, its headlights cutting sharply through the curtain of rain. Mr. Brian Thompson? The man said flatly, without a smile. I'm Ryan, Mr. Sterling's personal assistant. Your time is limited. A decision must be made now. Brian nodded nervously, bowing with excessive deference. Please, come in, Mr. Ryan. My wife is considering it. Ryan stepped inside without removing his wet shoes, leaving muddy tracks on the floor Amelia had just mopped. He placed a brown leather folder on the faded tablecloth of the dining table. Mrs. Thompson. Ryan turned to Amelia. His gaze appraised her from head to toe, as cold as if he were assessing the price of a dairy cow. Mr. Sterling requires an answer tonight. If you agree, the full payment of your husband's family debt will be processed this instant. If not, we will withdraw the offer and allow legal proceedings to commence against your husband tomorrow morning. Amelia looked at Brian, seeking protection, but her husband avoided her gaze, looking down at the floor. This is crazy. Amelia's voice was hoarse. Do you people think marriage is a game? I have my dignity. Dignity can't pay off a $150,000 debt, Mrs. Thompson, Ryan cut in sharply. He opened the folder. "These are divorce papers for you and Mr. Thompson, a formality to make your marriage to Mr. Sterling legally sound. After the 1-year contract is up, you are free to return to your ex-husband." "Divorce?" Amelia shrieked. Her legs gave out, and she sank into a chair. "Sign it, Amelia." Brian's voice was urgent. He approached her, offering a pen. "Please, for Mom's sake. Don't you dare bring her into this," Amelia cried out. Brian gritted his teeth. He pulled out his phone and started a video call. The call connected in seconds, and he aimed the screen directly at Amelia's face. On the screen was the face of an old woman, lying weakly with an oxygen tube in her nose. The walls behind her were the sterile white of a hospital room. "Amelia, honey." Her mother-in-law's voice was faint, punctuated by the steady beep of a heart monitor. "Please, Brian, I couldn't bear to see Brian in jail. They're going to take our house, dear." Amelia's defenses crumbled instantly. Her mother-in-law's sobs were her weakness. Amelia was an orphan, and she had always treated Brian's mother as her own, even though the old woman was often demanding. "Mom," Amelia sobbed, unable to speak. "Brian said, you're our only hope. Sweetie, do it for me, please. I just want some peace in my old age." Brian quickly ended the call before she could respond. He looked at Amelia with a triumphant expression hidden behind a mask of sorrow. "You heard her, Amelia. Her heart acted up again this afternoon after the debt collectors showed up. If you don't sign now, you'll be killing her." The words pierced Amelia's heart. The manipulation was perfect, trapping her from every angle: duty, love, and fear. Her hand trembled violently as she took the pen from Brian. The black ink felt as heavy as the sin she was about to carry. With her vision blurred by tears, Amelia scrawled her signature on the dotted line. "Good," Ryan said flatly. He gathered the documents with lightning speed. "The car is ready. You may only bring what you need for a few nights. No lengthy goodbyes." Brian let out a long, deep sigh of relief, as if a massive weight had just been lifted from his shoulders. He gave Amelia a brief hug, a gesture that felt hollow and cold. "Thank you, honey. You're my savior. I promise, in a year, I'll come for you. We'll start over." Amelia didn't return the hug. Her body was rigid. As Brian let go to help Ryan with her small bag, he carelessly placed his phone on the dining table, right in front of where Amelia was still sitting, stunned. Ping. Brian's phone screen lit up. A new message notification appeared. Though her eyes were swollen, Amelia caught the text clearly. The sender's name was Jessica. Strange. As far as she knew, Brian didn't have any urgent business with a Jessica late at night. But what made Amelia's blood run cold wasn't the name, but the message preview that appeared on the lock screen. "Just be patient, babe. Once the fool is gone, we'll celebrate at our usual spot. Miss you." Amelia's heart stopped for a second. Babe? And who was the fool? Before her mind could process the anomaly, Brian snatched the phone with a swift, panicked motion, a motion far too quick for someone with nothing to hide. He glanced at Amelia, his face slightly pale, but he quickly forced a stiff smile. "Oh, that's just a coworker, always joking around like that." The excuse sounded utterly unbelievable. Amelia wanted to ask, to demand an explanation, but Ryan was already at the doorway, impatiently checking his watch. "Mrs. Sterling, now." Amelia stood slowly, her feet as heavy as lead. She looked at Brian one last time, the man for whom she had just sacrificed everything. But for the first time in their 5-year marriage, she saw something alien in his eyes. A dark shadow lurked behind that sorrowful gaze. Amelia stepped out into the rain and got into the cold, luxurious car. As the window slowly rolled up, she saw that Brian was no longer wearing a sad face. Under the dim porch light, he was busy typing a reply on his phone, a faint, chilling smile on his lips. The rain hadn't stopped as the black sedan cut through the deserted city streets. Inside the quiet, leather-scented cabin, Amelia sat motionless. She stared blankly out the window, watching the streetlights blur into streaks against the rain-streaked glass. But her mind wasn't there. It was back on the porch of her rental house, fixated on the faint smile on Brian's face and the notification from Jessica. "Just be patient, babe." The word babe replayed in her head like a broken record. Amelia tried to dismiss it, to deny her own instincts. Maybe Brian was right. Maybe it was just a crude joke between friends. Men sometimes have a weird sense of humor, right? Brian was a good husband. He cried for his mother. He knelt at her feet. He couldn't possibly betray her at a time like this. "Wipe your tears, ma'am." Ryan's voice broke her reverie. He was watching her from the rearview mirror. "Mr. Sterling despises seeing a woman cry. In his house, tears are considered a disgusting weakness. If you want to survive there, learn to swallow them." Amelia quickly wiped her cheeks. "I'm sorry, Mr. Ryan." The car turned through a massive, towering iron gate. A house, no, a mansion, stood proudly in the darkness. Its colonial architecture was cold and intimidating, with no warmth emanating from its large windows. As soon as she got out of the car, Amelia was led inside by two maids in gray uniforms who looked at her with condescending glances. They didn't speak, only gesturing for her to follow them to a large room in the left wing. There, in the center of the room, dimly lit by a crystal chandelier, a justice of the peace and two witnesses were already waiting. And there, for the first time, Amelia saw him. Mr. Sterling. The man sat in a sophisticated black wheelchair. His legs were covered with a thick plaid blanket. His face was handsome, with a strong jawline and a straight nose, but his expression was as cold as a polar ice cap. His sharp eyes stared straight ahead, as if Amelia were just another piece of furniture his assistant had purchased. No smile, no welcome. The marriage ceremony was swift and silent. There was no beautiful white dress, no wedding guests, no happy laughter, only the echoing voice of the justice of the peace and Amelia's trembling voice as she answered his questions. "I now pronounce you husband and wife." Those words sealed Amelia's fate. She was now the legal wife of Damian Sterling, the paralyzed billionaire. After the officials left, Ryan approached his boss's wheelchair. "Sir, this is Mrs. Amelia Sterling. As per your instructions, she will be staying in the master bedroom starting tonight." Sterling slowly turned his head to look at Amelia. His gaze was so piercing she felt naked. The man didn't say a word. He just grunted softly, a sound that implied contempt, and then turned his wheelchair away. Its electric motor whirred softly as he left the room, leaving Amelia alone again, her hands trembling. Amelia reached into her skirt pocket and took out her own phone. Its screen cracked. She needed an anchor. She needed Brian to reassure her that this was all real. Her fingers quickly typed a message. "Brian, I'm here. I'm scared. The people here are so cold." And Brian, "About that message earlier. Please be honest with me. Who is Jessica? Why did she call you babe?" Amelia waited, her heart pounding. A minute, 2 minutes. The two check marks turned blue. Brian was typing. "My God, Amelia, are you still on about that? I'm here praying, so grateful because Mom just woke up after hearing the debt was paid. I'm crying with relief, and you're accusing me of cheating with a coworker? How could you, Amelia? Do you want to give Mom another heart attack with your suspicions?" Amelia read the message with a tight chest. Guilt immediately washed over her. Brian was right. His mother was sick. How could she be so selfish, thinking about baseless suspicions while her husband was fighting to save his mother's life? "I'm sorry, Brian. I was just panicking. Give my love to your mom," Amelia replied, pushing her suspicions deep down into her heart. This was denial. Amelia chose to believe a sweet lie rather than face a bitter truth. "Ma'am," the voice of an older maid startled her, "let me show you to Mr. Sterling's room. He is waiting. Remember, your primary duty is to attend to all his needs, no matter how small." Amelia nodded weakly and put her phone away. They walked down a long hallway lined with unsettling abstract paintings. The maid stopped in front of a grand double door made of intricately carved teak wood. "Go inside. and whatever happens in there, do not scream. Mr. Sterling hates noise. The maid opened the door, pushed Amelia inside, and then closed it from the outside. Click. The sound of the lock turning was unmistakable. Amelia stood frozen near the door. The room was vast, dimly lit, and smelled strongly of sandalwood. In the center of the room, a king-sized bed dominated the space. And there, beside the bed, Mr. Sterling sat in his wheelchair, his back to her, facing a large window whose curtains were wide open, revealing the dark night sky. The silence was suffocating, broken only by the faint sound of the rain. Amelia summoned her courage and stepped forward. The wooden floorboards creaked softly beneath her feet. "Sir?" Amelia called out softly. Sterling didn't answer. His shoulders looked rigid. Amelia moved closer, intending to help her new husband into bed, like a caregiver. But when she was only a few feet away, her eyes caught something strange in the reflection of the window in front of him. In the glass, Amelia saw Mr. Sterling's face contorted into a smirk. Not a smirk of pain or sadness, but the predatory grin of a hunter who had just trapped his prey in a cage. And before Amelia could process the meaning of that smile, the wheelchair spun around with shocking speed to face her. Amelia's heart pounded in rhythm with the storm raging outside. Sterling's intense, unreadable gaze made her feel like a cornered deer facing a tiger. "Come here," Sterling commanded. His voice was a low, deep baritone that vibrated in her chest, so different from Brian's often hesitant, higher-pitched tone. Amelia swallowed hard, forcing her legs to move. I'll help you into bed, sir." Sterling didn't reply. He just watched her movements with a calculating stare. When Amelia stood directly in front of his wheelchair, a strong, masculine scent, a mix of expensive tobacco and cinnamon, overwhelmed her senses. Outside the glass wall of the room, huddled in the drenched bushes, a figure shivered in the cold. It was Brian. He hadn't gone to the hospital to be with his mother. He had lied. Jealousy and a possessive sense of ownership had driven him to sneak back. He knew where the master bedroom was because Ryan had once mentioned it offhandedly. Brian needed to be sure. He needed to see with his own eyes that Amelia wasn't serving Sterling as anything more than a nurse. He needed to make sure his asset was safe. Through a small gap in the curtains, Brian peeked in, his breath ragged. His heart calmed slightly, seeing Sterling still in the wheelchair. Good, Brian thought. The cripple can't do anything. Amelia will just tuck him in and then sleep on the couch. She's still mine. Inside the room, Amelia bent down awkwardly, trying to reach for Sterling's arm to help him up. "Excuse me, sir. You can lean on my shoulder," Amelia said, her voice trembling. Sterling raised his hand, but instead of taking her shoulder for support, his large, powerful hand wrapped around her slender waist. His grip was strong, hot, and demanding. Amelia gasped in shock. "Sir, your husband," Sterling whispered, his eyes fixed on Amelia's lips. "How much did he charge to sell a woman like you? 150,000? So cheap." "I'm not for sale." Amelia tried to pull back, her pride stung. "I did this for a husband who couldn't even protect you." Sterling cut her off cynically. Suddenly, his grip on her waist tightened, and what happened next made Amelia's blood run cold. Without any warning, without any visible effort, Sterling pulled Amelia's body closer as he planted his feet firmly on the floor. Slowly but surely, his powerful frame lifted from the wheelchair, not with a tremor, not with a struggle. Sterling stood, tall, solid, and towering over her. Amelia looked up, her eyes wide with shock, nearly bulging from their sockets. Her breath caught in her throat. The man who was reported to be completely paralyzed was now standing before her, easily 6'2", forcing her to crane her neck to meet his eyes. The muscles beneath his silk shirt were taut, a sign that he had never stopped training. "You!" Amelia's voice was lost in her shock. Outside the window, Brian felt as if he had been struck by lightning. He collapsed onto the muddy ground, his eyes unblinking, fixed on the scene inside. His brain refused to believe it. The medical reports said permanent paralysis. He was disabled. But the reality before his eyes shattered everything. Brian saw Sterling standing proudly, far more imposing than his own stooped, thin frame. He saw those broad shoulders. He saw how Sterling dominated the room just by standing. And what hurt Brian the most was seeing Amelia, his wife, the woman he thought was naive and easily controlled, now in the arms of a perfect man. Amelia looked so small, so right in Sterling's embrace. Inside the room, Sterling bent down, bringing his face level with Amelia's, who was still frozen in shock. "This world is full of deception, Amelia," Sterling whispered in her ear, his voice husky and sensual. "And your husband just made the biggest mistake of his life. He threw a lamb into a wolf's den, thinking the wolf was toothless." Sterling lifted Amelia's chin with one finger, forcing her to look into his piercing eyes. "Starting tonight, you will forget that pathetic excuse for a man. Because once you're in my arms," Sterling pulled their bodies together until there was no space left between them, allowing Amelia to feel the strong, steady beat of his heart. "I never let go of what is mine." Sterling held her. Not a rough embrace, but a possessive one that seemed to claim her entire being. Outside, Brian clutched his chest, which felt like it was being crushed. The pain he felt wasn't just jealousy. It was a feeling of insignificance, of humiliation. He had just realized that he had handed his most precious jewel to a true king. He had just realized that compared to Sterling, he was nothing but a speck of dust. Brian wanted to scream, to smash the glass, to pull Amelia out. But his legs were weak, powerless. The fear of Sterling's power and an overwhelming sense of inferiority paralyzed him. Ironically, he was the one who was now paralyzed mentally, while the supposed invalid stood tall, holding his wife. Brian stumbled backward in the pouring rain, his tears mixing with the downpour. He fumbled in his pocket, his hand shaking as he pulled out his phone, intending to text Amelia to get out immediately. But before he could type, he saw Sterling, inside, turn his head sharply toward the window, directly at the spot where Brian was hiding. Sterling smiled a cold, terrifying smile, and he slowly drew the curtain closed, leaving Brian alone outside in the darkness, with only his wild imagination of what was about to happen behind that curtain. Amelia stumbled backward until her back hit a solid teak wardrobe. Her breathing was rapid, her eyes fixed on Sterling with a bewildering mix of fear and awe. The man who was supposed to be helpless now stood tall in the middle of the room, having decisively closed the curtain. "Don't be afraid," Sterling said flatly. He walked over to a small table in the corner and poured a glass of water. His steps were firm, without a hint of muscular weakness. "Sir, you deceived everyone." Amelia's voice trembled, barely audible. "You deceived me." Sterling turned, offering the glass to her. "Drink. You're as pale as a ghost." Amelia shook her head, refusing to accept anything from this man full of secrets. Sterling placed the glass down hard on the nightstand, creating a sharp thud. He pulled out the vanity chair, spun it around, and sat facing Amelia, who was still standing, trembling and hugging herself. "Listen carefully, Amelia. In the world of high-stakes business, weakness is an invitation for assassination," Sterling began, his voice calm but piercing. "The accident last month was no accident. My car's brakes were sabotaged. Someone in this family wants me dead for the inheritance." Amelia's eyes widened. The world she had stepped into was far more terrifying than just being caught in the grip of loan sharks. "If they knew I survived without a scratch, they would try again. This time, maybe with poison or a bullet," Sterling continued. "This wheelchair is my shield. People let their guard down around a disabled man. They speak freely near me, revealing their dirty secrets and rotten plans because they think I'm just a useless lump of flesh." Sterling looked straight at Amelia. "Including your husband." Amelia flinched at the word husband. The pain surged back, the images of Brian handing her over, forcing her to sign the contract, all spinning in her head. "Why? Why me?" Amelia asked softly, fresh tears falling. "Why did you accept Brian's offer?" "Because your husband is the greediest, most easily controlled type of man. And you—" Sterling paused, his eyes scanning Amelia's innocent face. "You look like a foolish, obedient woman, the perfect disguise for the wife of a paralyzed billionaire." The words were sharp, hurtful, but honest. Amelia felt small. She sank to the thick, carpeted floor, crying silently. She felt trapped between two men who were both using her. Brian sold her for money. Sterling bought her as a shield. Sterling sighed deeply. He stood, took a thick blanket from the bed, and tossed it over Amelia's huddled form on the floor. "Sleep on the bed. I'll take the sofa," Sterling said coldly. He turned off the main light, leaving only the dim glow of a bedside lamp. "I won't touch you tonight. I'm not the animal you think I am." Amelia didn't move. She stayed on the floor, hugging her knees, lost in confusion and an overwhelming loneliness in the luxurious room that felt like a golden prison. Meanwhile, at a deserted roadside diner far from Sterling's exclusive neighborhood, Brian sat with trembling hands, clutching a cold cup of black coffee. His clothes were still damp. The image of Sterling standing tall haunted him like a nightmare. He felt stupid. He felt exposed. Ping. His phone buzzed. A message from Jessica. Brian opened it with a shaking finger. "Babe, you haven't sent the transfer yet? You said your mom's debt was paid off and you got some extra cash from your boss. I need it for the apartment rent. And don't forget you promised to buy me that gold bracelet." Brian ran his hands through his hair in frustration. He had just sold his loyal, legal wife. And now the money from that sale was being demanded by his mistress, who had never shared any of his struggles. Brian typed a harsh reply, "Be patient. I'll transfer it tomorrow morning." He shut off his phone and threw it on the table. His heart was broken, not from regret for betraying Amelia, but from the fear of imagining her now enjoying luxury with a man far superior to him. His sense of ownership was violated. His ego was severely wounded. "You just watch, Amelia," Brian muttered into the darkness. "Don't think you can have a good time over there and forget about me." Morning broke at the Sterling residence. Sunlight streamed through the gap in the curtains that had been shut so forcefully the night before. Amelia blinked, waking up on a mattress as soft as a cloud. She realized she must have fallen asleep on the floor and that someone Sterling had moved her to the bed. She glanced over. The sofa in the corner was neat. Sterling was gone. His wheelchair was gone too. The bedroom door opened. A maid entered carrying a tray with a lavish breakfast and a black velvet box. "Good morning, ma'am. Mr. Sterling has already left for the office through a secret garage exit, of course, so no one would see him walking," the maid said in a flat but polite tone. "He left this for you." The maid placed the velvet box on Amelia's lap and left. With a pounding heart, Amelia opened it. Inside was the latest model smartphone, worth thousands of dollars, and a sleek black credit card, an unlimited black card. Beneath the phone was a small note with neat, strong handwriting. "Stop crying over your fate. If you want to survive in this house, become a queen, not a maid. Use the card to change your appearance and turn on the phone. There's a welcome gift that will open your eyes to who you should really be crying for." Amelia pressed the power button on the new phone. It booted up instantly. No lock screen, only a single gallery app icon, which opened automatically. Amelia's finger trembled as she tapped it. A video began to play. CCTV footage from a dimly lit cafe. The date stamp was from 2 days ago, when Brian had said he was working late. On the small screen, Amelia saw her husband. But Brian wasn't working. He was sitting with a young blonde woman on his lap, laughing as he showed off a ring on her finger. Brian's voice in the recording was faint but clear, crushing the last remnants of Amelia's hope into dust. "Don't worry, babe. My stupid wife at home is easy to fool. I'm about to sacrifice her to my crippled boss. Once I get the money, I'll divorce her, and then we can get married for real." The phone dropped from Amelia's hand onto her lap. Her breath hitched, her tears instantly drying up, replaced by a fire of rage that burned in her chest. The video on the phone ended, leaving a black screen that reflected Amelia's face. The same face, but with a gaze that was now dead. Her tear ducts had run dry, wrung out by the previous night's sorrow, and now the last of her moisture had evaporated in the heat of an anger that coursed through her every vein. "Stupid wife," Amelia whispered, repeating Brian's words from the video. Her own voice sounded foreign to her ears, flat and cold. The bedroom door opened slowly. This time it wasn't a maid, but Ryan, pushing Mr. Sterling's wheelchair inside. As soon as the door was closed and locked, Sterling stood up, loosened the tie at his neck, and walked casually to the minibar in the corner of the room. "Have you seen the video?" Sterling asked without turning, pouring a glass of cold water. Amelia didn't answer. She just clutched the phone so tightly her knuckles turned white. Sterling turned around, leaning against the bar with his arms crossed. He looked at Amelia with an unreadable expression. Not pity, but more like a general assessing his soldier's readiness. "The woman in the video is named Jessica," Sterling said suddenly. "She's not just some mistress or a rich girl. She's the personal secretary to Mr. Henderson, the vice president who is most eager to push me out of my leadership position." Amelia slowly looked up. The information was like another painful piece of a puzzle falling into place. "Your husband, Brian, thinks he's in control. He thinks he's smart for tricking his wife and getting money from me," Sterling continued with a sneer. "In reality, he's just a pawn being played by Jessica and Henderson. They approached him, promising him a high-level position, just to get an informant inside my circle. And the best way into this house was through you." Amelia felt sick. So this marriage wasn't just Brian's spontaneous idea due to debt. It was a conspiracy. "And there's one more thing you need to know." Sterling walked closer, taking a brown envelope from his jacket pocket and tossing it onto Amelia's lap. "Open it." Amelia's hands trembled as she opened the envelope. Inside were the results of a medical examination from a prestigious fertility clinic. The patient's name, Jessica Miller. Diagnosis, positive pregnancy test. Gestational age, 8 weeks. Amelia's world collapsed for a second time, but this time there was no sound of crumbling, just silence, a profound silence. 8 weeks, Amelia whispered. That meant while Brian was supposedly working overtime 2 months ago to pay off his mother's debt, he was making a baby with this woman. Sterling nodded. "Brian planned to divorce you as soon as I died or after he got the branch director position Jessica promised him. The payment from me that cleared his mother's debt, most of it has already been transferred to Jessica's account to buy an apartment." Amelia let out a small, hollow laugh. "So all this time, I was saving money by eating leftovers and mending torn clothes, while he was buying an apartment for another woman and their illegitimate child." Amelia stood up. She walked to the large mirror on the wardrobe door. She saw her reflection, a thin woman with a dull complexion in a cheap, faded cotton house dress. She saw the stupid wife Brian had spoken of. "You have 2 choices, Amelia." Sterling's voice was close behind her. He stood right behind her, looking at their reflections in the mirror. "You can run away from here, go back to that rotten rental, and cry over your fate until you're blind. Or," Sterling placed his hands on her shoulders, his grip gentle but firm, "you can use that pain as fuel. You have my black card. You have the status of Mrs. Sterling. You have access no one else does." Amelia met Sterling's eyes in the reflection. "What do you want from me?" "I need an ally. Brian and Jessica think you're their spy in this house. They'll contact you, ask you to find my files, or steal confidential documents," Sterling whispered in her ear. "Be that spy, but be loyal to me. Feed them false information that will slowly destroy them." Amelia was silent for a moment. She remembered her sick mother-in-law's face, which Brian had also used as leverage. She remembered Brian's sweet promises when he proposed. It was all a lie. Amelia took a deep breath and exhaled slowly. When she opened her eyes, the sorrowful look was gone, replaced by a gaze as sharp as a razor. "I'll do it," Amelia said firmly. She turned to face Sterling. "But I have conditions." Sterling raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Name them. Don't ever call me stupid again, and help me make them suffer until they beg for death. Sterling smiled. This time it was a rare, genuine smile. Deal, Mrs. Sterling. Ping. The new phone in Amelia's hand buzzed. A message from Brian. Amelia, how is it? Is the cripple giving you a hard time? Remember, find out where he keeps the company seal. Jessica needs that info for our future. Delete this chat after you read it. Brian had slipped up, mentioning Jessica's name. How careless, how dismissive he was of Amelia's intelligence. Amelia looked at the screen coldly. Her fingers moved nimbly, typing a reply designed to both soothe and ensnare. Don't worry, Brian. This cripple is easy to fool. I haven't found the seal yet, but I saw him put the key to his safe in his medicine drawer. I'll take a picture of it when he's asleep. Pray for me. Love you. Amelia hit send. On the other end, Brian was surely smiling, thinking he had won. He had no idea that message was sent by an Amelia who was standing right next to the cripple, who was standing tall and holding an unlimited credit card ready to buy out Brian's dignity, down to its very roots. That morning, the city looked different to Amelia. It was no longer a cruel place that crushed her with traffic and dust, but a grand stage where she was about to play the leading role. The luxury sedan, driven by Ryan, pulled up to the lobby of the most exclusive shopping mall in the city. The automatic doors opened, and for the first time, Amelia stepped out, not as Brian's wife, who had to count change for parking, but as Mrs. Sterling, who held limitless power. Amelia wore a simple suit she found in a guest closet, but her head was held high. Sterling was right. Tears wouldn't change her fate. Money and power would. She walked into an international boutique, displaying gowns that cost as much as a car. A saleswoman with heavy makeup glanced at Amelia, then went back to her phone, clearly dismissing her plain appearance. "Excuse me, miss, we don't have a sales rack here," the saleswoman said curtly without looking up, as Amelia touched a maroon silk gown. "Discount items are in the basement." The old Amelia would have lowered her head in shame and left, her face burning. But today, Amelia remembered Brian's face, laughing with his mistress. She remembered their humiliation. Amelia took out her wallet and pulled out the sleek black card with gold trim Damian Sterling's titanium black card. She tapped it on the glass counter. The sound was a sharp click, loud enough to make the saleswoman look up. The saleswoman's eyes widened as she recognized the card. A card held by only a handful of tycoons in the country. A card with no spending limit. I'm so sorry, ma'am. How may I help you?" Her attitude shifted 180 degrees, becoming sickeningly sweet. "I need a complete overhaul," Amelia said coldly, meeting the woman's eyes. "Pick out the best outfits for formal, casual, and business settings. Also, get the manager of the best salon in this building over here. I don't have time to walk around." "Yes, ma'am, right away." The saleswoman scrambled off, frantically calling her colleagues. 3 hours later, Amelia sat before a large mirror in the boutique. She barely recognized the woman in the reflection. Her once dull hair, always tied back with a rubber band, was now cut in an elegant, shoulder-length bob, shining with health after an expensive treatment. Her once pale and tired face was now fresh, with natural makeup that highlighted her sharp cheekbones. Her body was draped in a perfectly tailored ivory blazer that hugged her curves in a classy yet sophisticated way. She looked like a successful career woman, no longer an abused housewife. Ping, ping, ping. The phone in Amelia's purse buzzed repeatedly. Messages from Brian. She had deliberately ignored him all morning. She unlocked the screen and read the string of messages with a smirk. "Amelia, where are you? Where's the money transfer? You said you'd send it this morning? Mom needs medicine, Amelia. How could you? Answer your phone. Don't think that just because you're the boss's wife, you can forget who you are." Brian was panicking. Of course. Without money from Amelia, he couldn't fund Jessica's lavish lifestyle. Amelia didn't reply immediately. She had the saleswoman take a picture of her standing elegantly, surrounded by a dozen high-end shopping bags. Hermès, Louboutin, diamond jewelry. Amelia sent the photo to Brian. A minute of silence. Then Amelia's phone vibrated continuously. An incoming call from Brian. Amelia rejected it. She calmly typed a reply. "Sorry, Brian. Can't talk. The cripple is near me." Brian's reply came in an instant, full of fury. "What the hell is that? You're shopping for luxury goods while your husband is stressing about money for mom? Are you crazy? How many thousands did you just spend?" Amelia typed again, weaving a lie that would be plausible to her husband's small mind. "Brian, don't be mad. This is a tactic. The cripple was getting suspicious about why I looked so poor when he'd given me an allowance. He forced me to go shopping today with his assistant. If I refused, he'd suspect I was funneling the money to you. Don't worry, Brian. This stuff is an asset. When things are safe, I'll sell these bags. I'll transfer all the money to you. Their value might even go up." On the other end, Amelia could imagine Brian, once furious, now softening at the thought of greed. Brian must be thinking, "She's right. A bag worth thousands. If I sell it, I could buy a new car. Okay, that makes sense. You're smarter than I thought, honey. Sorry I got emotional. All right, you hold on to the stuff for now. Don't damage it. Take care of yourself. I miss you." "I miss you?" Amelia sneered softly. "You miss my money, you mean?" She put her phone away and instructed Ryan to take all her purchases to the car. That afternoon, Amelia arrived back at Sterling's mansion. As she entered the living room, Sterling was sitting on the sofa in his wheelchair, of course, for the benefit of the other staff reading a file. He looked up, his eyes scanning Amelia's new look from head to toe. For a moment, Amelia saw surprise in his cold eyes before it was replaced by a look of warm appreciation. "Money is indeed the best cosmetic," Sterling commented flatly, though the corner of his lip twitched upwards. "Now you look like you belong by my side." "I am more than just an accessory, sir," Amelia retorted firmly, placing her new handbag on the table. "I've replied to Brian's message. I made him think I was forced to shop by you, and that these items will eventually be sold for his benefit." He bought it completely. Sterling closed his file. "Good. Let him think he's winning. An enemy is most vulnerable when they feel victorious." Suddenly, Sterling's face grew serious. He gestured for the maids in the room to leave. Once they were alone, he stood up and approached Amelia. "But the real test is just beginning." "What do you mean?" "Tomorrow night is the company's annual gala. All the directors will be there, including Mr. Henderson and his personal secretary, Jessica," Sterling said. Amelia's blood ran cold at the mention of her name. "Brian will be there too," Sterling continued. "Henderson invited him as Employee of the Year, but it's really just to make it easier for him to meet with Jessica. You need to be ready. Tomorrow, you will meet your real husband and his mistress at the same time, in public, while holding my hand." Amelia clenched her fists. Nerves shot through her, but hatred was stronger. "I'm ready," she answered, her voice steady. "We'll see." Sterling took a small box from his jacket pocket. "But before that, there's a small problem we need to deal with right now." He turned on the large TV, which was connected to the front gate's CCTV camera, an uninvited guest. On the screen, Amelia saw a sight that made her hold her breath. At the tall iron gate, an old woman in a shabby dress was shouting and banging on the bars. She wasn't alone. She had 2 large suitcases with her. It was her mother-in-law, Brian's mother, the woman who was supposedly dying from a heart attack just yesterday. On the screen, she looked perfectly healthy. Her face was red with anger, and her shouts were clearly picked up by the CCTV microphone. "Open up!" "I know my daughter-in-law is in there," Brian said. "Amelia is rich now. I want my share. I want to live here. Open up, or I'll tell everyone the rich people in there kidnapped my daughter-in-law." Amelia turned to Sterling, her face pale. Brian's lie about his mother's illness was a complete fabrication. The old woman was fine, and now she was here to plunder. What should I do? Amelia asked in a panic. Sterling watched the screen calmly, then turned to Amelia with a faint, dangerous smile. Welcome her. Let her in. We'll need a witness in the front row for her son's destruction. The massive iron gates creaked open, their sound piercing the quiet evening. Amelia stood on the marble veranda, flanked by Ryan, while Sterling watched from a darkened second-floor window. The old woman, Laura, the mother-in-law Amelia had respected like a queen for 5 years, strode in with her chin held high. There was no sign of shortness of breath or a pale face, nothing like someone who had just escaped death's door. Her steps were firm, her eyes darting around greedily at the lavish front garden. "Amelia," Laura shouted upon seeing her daughter-in-law. "How dare you! Living it up in a palace while leaving your mother-in-law all alone back home." Amelia descended the veranda steps calmly. This was no longer the Amelia who would rush to kiss her hand and apologize. She stood tall, meeting her mother-in-law's gaze with eyes as cold as ice. "Weren't you dying in the hospital, Mom?" "Brian said your heart gave out," Amelia said flatly. Laura stammered for a moment, but her thick-skinned nature quickly took over. "Ah, that was your husband's good prayers. They healed me right up. Besides, who would want to stay in that stuffy hospital? As soon as I heard you got a lot of money from your boss, I took a ride-share straight here. Where's my room? I want to rest." Without a shred of guilt, the old woman dragged her suitcases past Amelia, as if this mansion were her own. Ryan moved to block her, but Amelia raised a hand, signaling him to let her pass. As per Sterling's plan, the enemy had to be made comfortable before the slaughter. "Of course, Mom. There's a guest room in the back wing, near the kitchen. That way, it's easy for you to get a drink," Amelia said. "Good. Prepare dinner. I want steak, not that cheap stuff you used to make," Laura commanded as she sauntered inside. That evening, Amelia played her part perfectly. She served Laura, presenting a lavish meal left over from Sterling's dinner. Laura ate greedily, occasionally clicking her tongue in awe at the crystalware around her. "You're lucky, Amelia," Laura mumbled with her mouth full. "Your husband is a smart man. If it weren't for Brian's idea to sacrifice you to that crippled boss, we'd never be tasting meat this tender." Amelia's hand, pouring water, froze mid-air. "So, you knew? You knew Brian sold me?" Laura laughed dismissively. "Of course I knew. It was our plan all along. Brian wants to be a successful man, Amelia. He needs capital. As his wife, it's your duty to be devoted. Later, when Brian becomes a director and marries that lovely Jessica, you'll get a nice severance package. No need to be so dramatic." The water pitcher in Amelia's hand slammed onto the table, spilling its contents. But Amelia's face remained impassive, even as her heart boiled. The confession came so easily, as if Amelia were nothing more than a used item to be discarded. "Lovely Jessica? You've met her?" Amelia prodded, her hand discreetly touching the phone in her apron pocket, making sure the voice recorder was on. "Of course! She's a classy, beautiful woman. From a rich family. Not like you, a poor orphan," Laura rambled on without a filter. "Last month, Jessica took me to her ultrasound appointment. My grandson is a boy, Amelia, a prime heir. That's why you can't be stingy. Drain that boss of his fortune. Give it to Brian for Jessica's delivery costs." Amelia smiled. A terrifying smile. The recording was safely stored. Proof of the affair, the fraudulent scheme, and her mother-in-law's complicity enough to drag them all to court and leave them penniless. "Of course, Mom. I'll do my best," Amelia replied sweetly. "Now, you should rest. I have an important event with my boss tomorrow." The next day, the Sterling residence was a hive of activity. It was the day of the company gala. Ryan was busy arranging security, while a team of professional stylists was brought in exclusively for Amelia. In his room, Sterling was doing his final practice, pacing in front of a mirror, reaccustoming his legs so long, pretending to be lame to the authoritative stride of a ruler. Amelia entered, already dressed in a deep blue velvet evening gown that elegantly hugged her form. Her shoulders were bare, accentuating her glowing skin. A diamond necklace, borrowed from Sterling's late mother's collection, adorned her neck. Sterling stopped pacing. He stared at Amelia for a long moment, a gaze that made her cheeks flush. "Perfect," Sterling praised succinctly. "Brian won't recognize the woman he threw away." "Your mother-in-law is insisting on coming," Amelia reported. "She heard it's a party for the rich. She wants to show off a new dress she stole from my closet." "Let her come," Sterling grinned, adjusting the cuffs of his shirt. "Tonight, we need an audience in the front row when the show begins." That evening, the Grand Hyatt Ballroom was filled with corporate elites, business partners, and city socialites. A massive crystal chandelier hung majestically, reflecting light off the guests' jewelry. At a round table near the main stage, Brian sat anxiously. He wore a rented suit that was a bit too tight. Beside him sat Jessica, gaudy in a tight, fiery red dress that showed off her slightly bulging stomach. "Brian, where is that wife of yours?" Jessica whispered cattily. "She's supposed to be pushing the cripple's wheelchair. I want to see her servant face. Patience, babe." "They'll be here," Brian replied nervously, constantly glancing at the entrance. His heart was pounding. He just hoped Amelia wouldn't do anything embarrassing. "Remember, as soon as Mr. Henderson announces the new director appointment, we go straight up to the stage." At the same table, Laura was greedily snatching small cakes. She had arrived separately in a ride-share, as Brian had forbidden her from coming in the same car as Jessica, afraid of being found out before the announcement. "Don't you worry, Jessica. Honey," Laura winked. "That Amelia listens to me. I'll have her fetch you a drink later." Suddenly, the room lights dimmed. The orchestra fell silent. The MC's voice boomed from the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, please rise to welcome our president and CEO, Mr. Damian Sterling, and his beloved wife, Mrs. Amelia Sterling." The main ballroom doors swung open. A spotlight immediately shot towards them. Brian held his breath, squinting to find a wheelchair. Jessica prepared a mocking smile. Laura craned her neck. But there was no wheelchair. A hush fell over the entire room. At the doorway, two figures stood side by side. Sterling, in a black tuxedo, stood tall and powerful at his full 6'2", without a trace of disability. His hand was intimately linked with a woman whose beauty made every other woman in the room seem to fade. Amelia walked with her chin held high, radiating an intimidating aura of power. Brian's jaw dropped. The champagne flute in Jessica's hand slipped and shattered on the floor. They weren't seeing a disabled boss and a servant wife. They were seeing a king and queen who had just entered their slaughtering arena. Sterling looked directly at Brian's table, then whispered something in Amelia's ear. Amelia smiled. Then they began to descend the stairs, the crowd parting to make way. Each of Sterling's firm's steps on the floor seemed to count down the final seconds to Brian's utter destruction. The silence in the grand hall was so thick that the sound of Brian's own heart sounded like a war drum in his ears. He didn't blink, his eyes fixed on the figure striding confidently onto the stage. No wheelchair, no dragging leg. Mr. Sterling's steps were firm, powerful, as if each one asserted his ownership of this business empire. And beside him, Amelia, the woman he had berated over text this morning about an allowance, stood under the spotlights, the diamonds on her neck dazzling. She wasn't looking down in shame as she used to. She surveyed the sea of people with the cold, untouchable gaze of a queen. "Impossible," Jessica hissed, her face pale beneath her thick makeup. That's the blue sapphire heirloom of the Sterling family. It's worth millions. Why is that servant wearing it?" Laura, sitting next to Jessica, choked on the cake she was chewing. Her eyes nearly popped out of her head. "Amelia! That's my Amelia. Why is she so beautiful?" On stage, Sterling accepted a microphone from Ryan. He didn't speak immediately. He let the silence torture the hundreds of guests who had gossiped about his paralysis for months. His gaze swept the room, then settled on table number 13, where Brian, Jessica, and Mr. Henderson were sitting. Sterling smiled, a smile that made Brian's blood run cold. "Good evening," Sterling's baritone voice echoed, vibrating through the hall. "My apologies if I've surprised you all by standing here. There were certain parties who were very much hoping I would remain in a wheelchair forever, or better yet, dead." A wave of murmurs rippled through the crowd. Mr. Henderson, Jessica's boss, was visibly sweating, frantically loosening his tie. "Tonight, I was scheduled to announce a restructuring of the board," Sterling continued. "But before that, I want to introduce the extraordinary woman by my side. My wife, Amelia Sterling, the woman who saved me from an accident engineered by someone from within, and the woman who patiently gathered evidence while our enemies thought she was just a stupid woman." Brian felt his knees buckle. He sank into his chair. "Gathered evidence? Brian Thompson!" Sterling's voice boomed, his name called out without any honorific. The spotlight instantly swiveled to Brian, who looked like a trapped rat. Every eye in the room turned to him. "Please, come forward." Sterling's tone was not an invitation, it was a command. Brian trembled. He tried to stand, but his legs were shaky. Beside him, Jessica turned her face away, pretending not to know him. Laura tried to hide under the tablecloth. Stumbling, Brian made his way to the stage, his mind in a chaotic whirl. Is this a promotion? Is Sterling going to forgive me because Amelia persuaded him? The naive hope flickered for a second. As soon as Brian reached the foot of the stage, Sterling signaled the operator of the giant screen behind him. "Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Thompson here is very eager to become a director. Let's take a look at his portfolio." The giant screen lit up, but it wasn't sales charts that appeared. It was screenshots of text conversations between Brian and Jessica. Then, CCTV footage of Brian handing confidential company data to a business rival. Then, proof of financial corruption. A $500,000 transfer from the company's accounts to Brian's personal account, which was then forwarded to Jessica Miller's account for the purchase of an apartment. The hall erupted in gasps and jeers. Embezzlement, selling corporate secrets, and attempted murder by sabotaging my car, in cooperation with Mr. Henderson, Sterling's voice thundered, sentencing Brian in front of hundreds of witnesses. Brian's face was as white as a sheet. He turned to Amelia, searching for mercy. "Amelia! Amelia!" he pleaded, his voice hoarse. "Help me! I made a mistake. Jessica made me do it. I love you." Amelia stepped forward to the edge of the stage, looking down at Brian. There were no tears on her beautiful face. She took the microphone from Sterling. "You love me, Brian?" she asked softly, her voice carrying through the speakers. "Or do you love the money you got from selling your own wife?" Amelia took out her new phone and played the audio recording of Laura from the previous night, confessing that Brian had deliberately sacrificed her to get capital to marry Jessica. Laura's shrill voice echoed clearly. "Brian wants to be a successful man. As his wife, it's your duty to be devoted. Later, when he marries that lovely Jessica, you'll get a nice severance package." It was over. Brian fell to his knees on the stage floor, broken. His shame laid bare for the world to see. "You aren't just a failed husband, Brian. You are a failed human being," Amelia said coldly. "And by the way, about that stupid wife you love to laugh about with your mistress, that stupid wife is the one who turned all of this evidence over to the police this morning." As if on cue, the side doors of the ballroom burst open. 4 uniformed police officers marched in. They immediately apprehended Mr. Henderson, who was trying to flee, then moved towards the stage to handcuff Brian. "Amelia! Amelia, don't do this! Mom! Where's my mom?" Brian screamed hysterically as the cold metal of the handcuffs snapped around his wrists. Seeing her son being dragged away, Laura suddenly ran to the front of the stage. Not to defend him, but to fall at Amelia's feet. "Amelia, sweetie, I didn't know anything. Brian made me do it. Don't let them take me to jail. You're my favorite daughter-in-law." the old woman wailed shamelessly. Amelia looked down at her with disgust. "Favorite? I thought I was just a poor orphan you were going to bleed dry," she signaled to Ryan. "Get this woman out of here. Make sure she doesn't take a single thing from my house, including the dress she stole from my closet." Jessica, seeing her two protectors arrested, tried to slip away into the crowd, but Sterling was faster. "And as for you, Miss Miller," Sterling's voice stopped her in her tracks. "Your termination letter is waiting for you at the security desk, and my lawyer will be suing for the return of the apartment purchased with stolen company funds. You'll be giving birth in a prison cell." Jessica shrieked as a female officer escorted her out. The party had turned into a brutal but satisfying public trial. Brian was dragged away, still screaming Amelia's name, but she had already turned her back. She took Sterling's arm again. Sterling looked at his wife with pride. He raised his champagne glass high. "To new beginnings," he whispered. "To the end of foolishness," Amelia replied firmly, clinking her glass against his. But as Brian disappeared through the doors, Amelia felt her legs tremble slightly. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by an overwhelming exhaustion. Sterling quickly steadied her waist to keep her from falling. "Hold on a little longer, my queen," he whispered softly, a warmth in his voice that was a world away from his usual cold demeanor. "After this, we'll go home. There are things we need to settle, just the two of us, as a real husband and wife." Amelia's face flushed. She had just realized that their sham marriage contract was, technically, over now that Brian was destroyed. She was now faced with a new reality. She was legally married to the most dangerous and captivating man in the room. And tonight, they would be going home to the same bedroom. The glittering city lights slowly faded behind them as the luxury sedan glided through the quiet night toward the Sterling estate. There was no music, no conversation, just the soft hum of the engine and the sound of Amelia's breathing, which was finally steadying after the emotional storm she had endured. Amelia rested her head against the car window. The party was over. The charade had concluded with a spectacular finale. Brian was in police custody, Laura was disgraced, and Jessica was on her way to a jail cell. Mission accomplished. Upon arriving at the mansion, Amelia went straight to the master bedroom. She kicked off her painful high heels and walked to the vanity. Slowly, she removed the borrowed diamond necklace, placing it back in its velvet box. She looked at her reflection in the mirror. Her makeup was still perfect, but her eyes betrayed a deep exhaustion. "It's over," Amelia whispered to herself. She opened the closet and pulled out her old, worn suitcase, the one she had brought with her when Brian first cast her out. Amelia began packing her simple clothes. Cotton house dresses, old t-shirts, plain pants. She didn't touch a single one of the luxurious gowns or designer bags Sterling had bought her. They weren't hers. They were props for the act. The sound of the door opening made Amelia turn. Sterling stood there, his bow tie loosened, the top of his white shirt unbuttoned, revealing a glimpse of his broad chest. He leaned against the doorframe, frowning at the pile of clothes in her suitcase. "What are you doing?" Sterling asked, his voice low but sharp. "Packing, sir," Amelia answered quietly, not daring to meet his intense gaze. "My job is done. Brian is ruined. Our agreement was that I would help you defeat your enemies, and you would help me get my revenge. We're even now." Amelia closed the suitcase and placed the black credit card and the expensive phone on the nightstand. "Thank you for everything. I'll file for divorce tomorrow so you can be free of Thud," Amelia gasped. In a flash, Sterling had crossed the room and kicked her suitcase, sending it flying into a corner. Before she could protest, he had gripped both of her shoulders, pressing her against the wall. "Who gave you permission to leave?" Sterling hissed, his face inches from hers. His warm breath, smelling of mint and faint alcohol, washed over her skin. The contract. To hell with the contract." Sterling cut her off gruffly. His eyes flashed with anger, but there was something else there, too, a fear of loss. "Do you think I did all this just to get revenge on a corrupt subordinate like Brian?" Sterling stared deep into her eyes. I chose you, not because you were stupid or easy to control. I chose you because I saw how you survived. I saw a woman who stood strong even when her world was collapsing. Sterling released his grip, his touch softening as he gently caressed her cheek, a stark contrast to his harsh tone. That first night you came into this room, when you were terrified but still tried to take care of the man you thought was a helpless cripple, that's when I knew I could never let you go. Tears streamed down Amelia's face, unstoppable. But I'm a divorcee, sir, the ex-wife of a con man. I'm not worthy of being with Sterling. Silenced her with a kiss. It wasn't a demanding kiss, but one that was deep, full of possessiveness and promise. Amelia froze for a second, but the warmth of Sterling's body melted her defenses. She closed her eyes and returned the kiss, pouring out all the pain and longing she had suppressed for so long. When Sterling finally broke the kiss, Amelia was breathless, her face flushed. From this moment on, you will erase the word sir from your vocabulary, Sterling whispered. Call me Damien, or honey, or darling, whatever you want, but you are Mrs. Amelia Sterling. Not pretend, not a contract, forever. Amelia nodded, sobbing with relief and joy. Sterling pulled her into a tight embrace, letting her bury her face in his strong chest. 3 months later, Amelia sat in the visitors' area of the state penitentiary, separated by a thick pane of glass. Across from her sat a thin man with a shaved head in a faded blue prison uniform, Brian. His face was gaunt, his eyes hollow and lifeless. There was no trace of the arrogant manager who used to yell at her. Our divorce is final, Amelia said flatly, sliding a copy of the court decree through the small slot at the bottom of the glass. Brian stared at the paper with a trembling hand. Amelia, please. It's hell in here. My cellmate, they beat me every day. They take my food. Brian pressed his palm against the glass. My mom had a stroke. She's in a state-run nursing home because the bank took her house. Jessica, she miscarried in prison and lost her mind. I'm all alone, Amelia. I'm destroyed. Amelia listened to it all without expression. The old Amelia's conscience might have been moved to help, but not this time. Her pity had been murdered by Brian's betrayal. That's the harvest from the seeds you planted, Amelia replied coldly. Enjoy the rest of your life in here, Brian. Don't ever contact me again. Amelia stood, turned, and walked away. Amelia, Amelia, don't go. Amelia. Brian's shouts were faint, muffled by the thick glass. But Amelia didn't look back. She walked out of the grim prison building and into the bright sunlight. A luxury car was waiting. The back door opened, and Damien Sterling sat there, smiling and holding out his hand. Amelia took her husband's hand and got into the car, leaving her dark past behind the iron gates of the prison. Is it done? Damien asked, kissing the back of her hand. It's done, Amelia replied firmly. She rested her head on her husband's shoulder. Where are we going now? Damien took out his phone, showing her a message from their architect. It was a design for a private beachfront villa. We're going to build our own palace, far from all the noise. Just us. And maybe a nursery we should start planning soon, Damien teased, winking. Amelia smiled, a genuine happy smile, her face glowing. She was no longer a replacement wife. She was no longer a sacrifice. She was a true queen who had found her king. And for those who had hurt her, karma had delivered its sentence perfectly. The car drove on, carrying Amelia toward a bright future, leaving Brian as nothing more than a name in a pathetic, forgotten past.